Sick of getting blisters? Stop slipping and just be comfortable with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Great fit, great comfort, lots of grip, and an even better price. Available now at puregripsocks.com.
I think it's fair to say that almost all the football boots that are currently available were in one way or another influenced by a pair of boots that came out in 2014. And inside this box is a pair of very rare boots that I've never shown you guys on this channel that did technically come out in 2014, but unfortunately was discontinued in favor of a very new concept. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the very last pair of CTR360s in the form of the limited edition Lights Out CTR360 Maestri 3, limited to just 2,500 individually numbered pairs worldwide. The CTR360 series was responsible for the creation of the control boot category, which is obviously a very popular one these days, and a boot that was replaced by what is now the iconic Magista Obra 1. A great pair of football boots for sure, but honestly, looking back side by side, I think this is one of Nike's best football boots ever. Let me explain. And really quickly, if you enjoy these videos of older football boots, hard to believe these came out 9 years ago, but they did. Drop a like on the video and make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my future content, including reviews of all the latest football boots of 2023. Now, for those that can't remember back that far, the Lights Out CTR360s that I'm holding right here were basically the send-off for the CTR360 line, where obviously at this point Nike knew that the Magista Obra was going to be replacing it, and of course the concept was entirely different, going away from Kangalite and of course swapping it out for Flyknit and a mid-cut collar, the first of its kind, and obviously something that would become very influential in the world of football boots from a materials and technology perspective. It's also a fun fact, the Magista Obra was originally going to be the CTR360 Maestri 4, but because it was such a drastic change of concept and materials, they decided a new name would be better. Nonetheless, when this football boot was originally unveiled, unfortunately, the inventory was not available anywhere, and they wouldn't actually become available until months after they were unveiled, after the Magista Obra had already launched, which is part of the reason why I never ended up making a video on them back in the day, because the CTR360 at this time, by the time these were in my hand, were pretty much old news. And as a send-off pair, I think it's kind of unusual to make them a blackout, but this was kind of the fade to black end of an era concept, where again, this represented the creation or the start of the control boot category, being the third CTR360 Maestri. And what was also cool about these is they were the only limited release of this particular football boot, where you can see on the back, and it's very difficult to read, they are individually numbered out of 2,500 pairs. I have pair number 426 out of 2,500. As for the tech and performance side of things, there are a few notable technologies of the Maestri 3, but arguably the most important one in terms of what's still relevant within the Nike brand is ACC technology. The Maestri 3 was the first football boot to feature all conditions control. And as I've talked about many times on the channel before, when ACC was originally introduced on this football boot, the CTR360 Maestri 3 had this very distinctive, almost gritty texture to the surface, where when the boots got wet, they legitimately felt like they gripped the ball a little bit more. And once Nike realized this was such a popular feature for these and rolled it out on the Tiempos, the Mercurials, and the T90s at the time, all of those ACC variants of those football boots had the same surface texture as the Maestri 3, and I felt like the ACC technology was legitimately effective. It was unfortunately over time where ACC almost felt like a bit of an afterthought in terms of this gritty texturing going away and the grip levels between all the different football boots with ACC being completely different, where I can't say for sure that it did absolutely nothing, but its effectiveness in the early days was certainly a lot more significant than I think what it is now. Another unique element of the Maestri 3 is the full Kangalite synthetic upper, Kangalite being a replacement or a substitute, if you will, for natural kangaroo leather, where it's lighter, it doesn't absorb as much water, it doesn't stretch as much, they can play around with the surface texture a little bit more than natural leather, and it was basically the leather feel with all the upsides of a synthetic, at least according to Nike. But I do think that this material has aged really well. Kangolite originally being introduced on the Maestri 1, this being a lot more streamlined than I think what the Maestri 1 and 2 had on offer, in that it doesn't have the big memory foam inserts, mainly here on the lateral side of the forefoot. But in general, the touch on the ball was super clean. These kind of indentations allowed for the water to kind of just flow off the surface of the upper really nicely. And of course, you had the rubber elements here along the medial side of the foot that legitimately provided extra grip when receiving a pass, making a pass, sometimes even shooting, depending on what part of the foot you caught the ball on. And in general, it was, again, a noticeable feature, something that I think so many modern day technologies have on offer. But when you actually play in the football boots, you come to realize that they're just not noticeable. All the tech on the Maestri 3 legitimately felt like something different from other football boots that were available at the time, and that's something that I really love about this era of Nike. The sole plate and stud pattern was also way more speed boot-esque than I think a lot of people gave it credit for, in that it got a lot more aggressive from the first two generations of CTR360, and kind of having these bladed studs in the forefoot and a little bit of kind of like these half circle studs with a bladed edge. It made for a really good bite when pushing off, but still that freedom to twist and pivot that admittedly was pretty similar from a layout perspective to what you're going to find from the Nike Tiempo series, but definitely that little bit more aggressive. And then one last aspect of this boot that I think was really overlooked at the time was how light they actually were. In a size 9.5 US, you'll see that the Maestri 3 weighs in at 8.2 ounces, the equivalent of 233 grams, which is not exceptionally lightweight by today's 2023 standards, but it must be said that this does have a pretty heavy-duty insole compared to most of the football boots that are currently available. So if you swap that out for one with a mesh liner and some perforations, you'd probably shave half an ounce, and these would be as light, if not lighter, than most of the boots that are currently available. And as for how they compare to their replacement, I think when you're talking about quality of fit and comfort, the actual shape of these two boots is pretty similar, but the early days of mid-cut football boots from Nike, we all know it, weren't the most comfortable. Getting a blister around the Achilles tendon area was very, very common. So from a comfort perspective, I definitely think the Maestri 3 was better. When it comes to touch, this was definitely a lot more padded and more leather-like because of that Kangolite synthetic, where of course the Flyknit era of Nike, the introduction of Flyknit, I should say, made for that sock-like sensation. That was obviously very popular back in 2014 and is still popular now. So I think touch is very much a personal preference thing, but being somebody that does like a little bit more of a padded feel, again, I'd pick the Maestris over the Magistas. And then when it comes to sole plates and stud patterns, as much as I like what they did again on the Magista Obra 1, I think the sole plate and stud pattern of the Maestri 3 is that little bit better. Perhaps it's an unpopular take, and you definitely can't neglect the impact and importance of the Magista Obra 1 and the technology that it introduced, but I do think it's a bit of a shame that Nike didn't continue on with what they built with the CTR360 Maestri 1, 2, and 3.